It was a chilly Thursday morning in November when Marcus Wright, the newly appointed police chief, pulled up in front of the precinct. Dressed in a plain hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, he didn't look like someone with decades of experience or the weight of a leadership position on his shoulders. His car, old and unremarkable, blended into the parking lot with ease. Marcus wanted to stay under the radar, to see his officers as they truly were, without the pretenses that often accompanied an official introduction. The precinct buzzed with activity as officers filed in, heading to their desks with coffee cups in hand and laughter echoing in the hallways. It was all so familiar, the routine. Marcus walked past them unnoticed, scanning the faces of those around him. He wasn't a stranger to being overlooked, especially as a black man in law enforcement, but today it felt oddly empowering. His mission was clear: uncover what lay beneath the surface of this precinct's culture. As he approached the entrance, he overheard snippets of conversation. A couple of officers talking about the previous night's game, another group sharing a joke. Marcus felt the tension in his chest, knowing that things weren't always as lighthearted as they seemed. Inside, he found the usual mix of desks cluttered with paperwork and tired faces, but one officer, Officer Ryan Phillips, stood out. Tall and broad-shouldered, Phillips had a reputation for being one of the more traditional cops in the precinct. He often spoke about keeping things the old-fashioned way. Marcus didn't think much of him at first, but when Phillips shot him a look of disdain, a bad feeling crept up his spine. "You lost, boy," Phillips said with a laugh, stepping up to Marcus. His words hung heavy with an edge of condescension that made Marcus pause. Marcus swallowed his irritation. "I'm just looking for the briefing room," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yeah? Well, this isn't the place for you," Phillips sneered. "You'd better get out of here before you make things worse." Before Marcus could respond, Phillips took a step closer, leaning in as if to intimidate him. "This is a real police station, not a charity case," he mocked, his breath smelling of stale coffee. And then, in a moment that seemed to stretch for an eternity, Phillips spat in Marcus's face. Marcus's mind raced. The spit was warm, trickling down his cheek. His heart pounded in his ears, but he didn't flinch. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, and wiped his face slowly, his eyes fixed on Phillips. "Is this how you treat everyone who walks through those doors?" Marcus asked, his voice calm, controlled, but cutting. Phillips smirked, uncaring. "Only the ones who don't belong here." His laughter echoed around the room, and a few other officers chuckled along with him. Marcus stood still for a long moment, letting the absurdity of the situation settle into his bones. He didn't say another word. Instead, he turned and walked down the hallway toward the briefing room, ignoring the sneers and whispers from the officers behind him. When he entered the room, the chatter died down. Captain David Hunter, a burly man with a mustache that seemed to define his personality, was standing at the front of the room. He cleared his throat. "All right, everyone," Hunter began, his voice booming. "We've got an important introduction today. Please welcome your new chief of police." Marcus stepped forward, placing a folder with the precinct's seal on the podium. The room went silent as they took in the man standing before them. Phillips, still leaning against the wall, caught a glimpse of Marcus's face. His smirk faltered as recognition dawned. "Good morning," Marcus said, his voice steady and authoritative. "My name is Marcus Wright, and as of today, I'm your new chief of police." A stunned silence filled the room. Phillips's face turned pale, his bravado evaporating in an instant. The other officers exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from shock to unease. "I came in today in plain clothes," Marcus continued, his eyes scanning the room, locking on Phillips for a moment longer than necessary. "I wanted to see the department without the polished facade, to see how things really work here." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. "In my short time here, I've already seen behaviors that are not just unprofessional, but downright disrespectful." Marcus's voice rang out, firm and unwavering. "Let me make this clear. The culture of disrespect stops today." Marcus let the room digest his words, his gaze never leaving Phillips. The officer shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. "You see what happened earlier," "When you decided to spit in my face, Phillips," Marcus said, stepping closer to the man. "That wasn't just disrespect toward me. It was a direct attack on everything we stand for as law enforcement officers." Phillips stammered, his face flushed with embarrassment. I didn't know, Chief. I didn't." "That's exactly the problem," Marcus interrupted sharply. "You didn't care to know. You didn't take a moment to stop and think before you acted. You assumed I didn't matter." Marcus let his words sink in, each one cutting through the air like a blade. The rest of the officers remained frozen, their faces a mix of guilt and discomfort. Marcus turned his attention to the group, his voice rising. "What I saw here today wasn't just one man's mistake," he said, his tone gaining strength. "It's a culture. A culture that allows prejudice and disrespect to thrive, and that stops now." He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle over the room. "Effective immediately, Officer Phillips is suspended pending an internal investigation," Marcus continued. "And for those of you who think this is just a slap on the wrist, think again. This is the first of many changes." Phillips's face turned crimson as he glanced around the room, trying to avoid the stares of his colleagues. "This isn't about punishment," Marcus said firmly, his eyes scanning the room. "It's about setting a standard. If you're not willing to rise to that standard, then this isn't the place for you." Marcus's gaze was unwavering as he locked eyes with each officer. "We will operate with integrity, respect, and accountability. And from this day forward, I will hold each one of you accountable for your actions." The room was eerily silent. Phillips stormed out, and the rest of the officers quietly shuffled out of the room, their usual chatter absent. Marcus remained at the front for a moment, standing tall. He knew this was just the beginning, but it was a step forward, one that would set the tone for everything that came next.